Good afternoon. Welcome to the second to last session of the FSOSS 2014 conference. I'm your chair for the afternoon, Mayor Koskowski. I'm here to introduce a distinguished speaker, Nelson Coe. He's the project admin of the Tiki open source software community and also the chief technology officer at Synergic Solutions Incorporated. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
He previously led the implementation of Tiki for Microsoft support of the Firefox support of Mozilla, not Microsoft. Firefox support of Mozilla, a pioneer in open source customer support. Nelson has previously held positions in organizations such as the Bank of Canada, Hewlett Packard, and Singapore Telecom. Successfully architected leading-edge solutions brought to market across the world for companies such as Transworld International Interactive and Telstra. Nelson holds an MEng, Technology Innovation Management degree from Carleton University and an MA in Economics from the University of Toronto. And he'll be speaking about how to implement the Bootstrap CSS framework, lessons learned from Tiki, Wiki, CMS groupware. So without further ado, I give you Nelson Coe.
Hopefully this system holds up. This is a mismatch of screen resolutions here. I'm trying to run out. This is the topic of this talk, Bootstrap CSS frameworks. Just quick getting to know each other so that I can decide what to do, whether to go more into looking at code or just high level. How many in the room know already about Bootstrap? Use Bootstrap in your projects. Okay, that's good. And how many in the room are you call yourself designer? Developer? Or kind of both? Okay. Some of you might actually know more than me, so hope if that's the case, feel free to give us some help because we'll be trying to implement Bootstrap in the TikiWiki CMS groupware. That will last about a year. And we face some issues. Some of it we don't know if we found the right solution to it so far. Still kind of plugging through some of the things we face. But it's been good. Overall, it's been quite successful, and we're almost kind of a month or two away from the version that would be the targeted version for Bootstrap to be taken. Who I am, I've been kind of in the web business for a while, and I'm kind of old enough such that my Jedi skills are starting to wane a little bit slower, slower reaction time. But otherwise, I started off just to play mastering and hacking HTML back when there were no tools at all. Back when JavaScript was the last thing you wanted to use on the web, but well, those things have changed. Since then, I've been doing different things, systems administration. I was part of the Firefox support team for a couple of years, and I am still an admin in the Tiki open source community. I founded a company in 2006, Citadel Rock, focused on building online communities, and that merged last year with communications company is to become Synergic Solutions. Synergic Solutions as a company is believed in empowering people around a common purpose to make a difference. So we found that it doesn't matter who the people are, they with a common purpose, and we need to collaborate, communicate, and to connect successfully together. We're there to help. So online communities is the focus, but not just on the technology side of things, also the community management side of things. The whole kind of providing strategies to encourage collaboration, to build community, and so on. So the mission is a little bit more operationalized, to connect the right people with the right information at the right time for the best result. Yeah, come on. Tiki, on the other hand, has been around since 2002. So it's 12 years old now, it's 2014. So early 2002 it was founded. It was founded when a lot of open source content management systems were founded around the same time as Drupal, around the same time as Joomla, or well, actually Humble, if you go back that far. And a lot of other platforms. WordPress might have been a little bit, a couple of years later. I can't remember when WordPress was founded. Tiki was founded from a wiki background. The founder of Tiki originally called it Tiki Wiki. That's all it was called. Now it's called Tiki Wiki CMS Groupware because we found that it did so much more. And we might, call it anything. Tiki social platform, Tiki anything. That's the branding today. Pretty much because it's used in all sorts of environments. It is extremely feature rich. It contains wikis like Wikipedia, forums like PHPBB, blogs and articles like WordPress. It has file gallery system and a tracker-based system as well. So it's used a lot to build form-based applications, whether it's on the web or for internal company use. It's been around for quite a bit. It's downloaded more than 1 million times. Every year it wins kind of something, People's Choice Award or something. It's not one of the most widely deployed systems around, but the people who use it find it great for using it for. It's used for all sorts of sites, online community websites, intranets, extranets, social business platforms. That includes stuff like internal social networking within organizations, collaboration, sharing of files, creating kind of form-based workflow, and even e-commerce. It's something that it's relatively new and Tiki, but it's improving and getting better. It's written in PHP. For those of you who are interested primarily, it's increasingly used jQuery as a framework for JavaScript. And it uses Smarty templates as well. So later on when I'll be showing some HTML, which are in fact Smarty templates, you see some things which, if you're not familiar with Smarty, you say, hey, what's that? But essentially it's a templating system used for web apps. Bootstrap was, for those of you, since a lot of you in the room already know, designed by Twitter, open source, set of tools for creating websites and web applications, CSS framework. Since version 2, it's been focused on responsive web design, provides that. How many of you know what responsive web design is? Okay. And since version 3, Twitter has stated a mobile-first philosophy in design. Basically designing for mobile device first and foremost, and then the other devices. This doesn't mean that other devices take second priority or are second, are not as important. But basically the logic here is that if you design for a smaller device first, you have a much better chance of being successful in designing something that's useful across all the platforms, all of your devices. Then you design for a big form factor. Because if you design for a big form factor first, there's really no, you're going to be tearing your hair out, trying to reduce it to make it work well in a mobile platform. And that's what, that used to be the philosophy for a while. For example, jQuery Mobile, which is, how many of you have heard of jQuery Mobile or have used it? Okay, jQuery Mobile has been an attempt at trying to reduce full-scale websites into mobile form factor. We've had that in Tiki for a few years now. You get mixed results, but it's not. You're really that's really more of a clutch or hack, if you will, rather than designing it first. There are other similar tools out there. Foundation. How many have heard of it? Okay, it's probably the closest. I think it's the closest competitor to Bootstrap still. I last checked these stats about 6 months ago, so I don't know if it's up to date, but the gap's really big. The more than half of the market is basically Bootstraps. Semantic UI is another attempt at doing something similar, to have a common language to express different blocks of HTML and CSS. 96DGS was an earlier attempt at trying to put some structure into the whole exercise of creating a web page, basically. And it's basically a grid system based on 960 pixels. So that's why it's 96DGS. That was our actually first thing that Tiki used in its attempt at making it more structured in terms of design stuff in the web. So why use Bootstrap? Time saver. That commonly is the most commonly used explanation. For those of you who use Bootstrap, did it actually save you time? Who found it to be a time saver? Who found it to be too difficult or a time waster? All right. So I think I'm sticking to the choir here. Definitely, once you use it, it's amazing how you then get think how you ever did web design or web development without it. It's especially the CSS side of things. One of the guys who worked at Synergic was actively pushing this, despite as in pushing this for us to adopt it as soon as possible. And we went ahead with it, and after using it, you said, well, it was worth the learning curve, the effort. It wasn't that difficult to learn, so I encourage everyone to learn about it. It is, above all, it really paid off because it's common language between designers and developers. It's also a common language between the people who are just doing Photoshop and a CSS person. In Synergy, for example, we have one person who only does Photoshop, not the CSS. And you can actually, for that person, you can actually find Photoshop templates, PSD files that you can download that contain different Bootstrap elements, or you can make your own. But there's so many you can download and modify, so we'll just do that. It really made it easier for that person to communicate what she wanted to the person doing CSS by really saying this is a particular Bootstrap element, as opposed to I want a class that is with the hex code of this, with a color of this, and with rounded corners of this radius, and so on and so forth. You're basically telling the whole story if you don't have a language by which you define things that you use within the website. For us, as a online community developer, it really helped as well because we didn't want all of our sites to be totally different from each other. We want to have common elements that we can reuse, just from an expediency perspective, and so that when we maintain it for different customers, we don't have to we can fix one thing for one site and have it be fixed across all of our sites. And for sure, there are learnings to be found across different sites that should be generically applied to all sites as opposed to just looking at our own. So that has given us a more standard approach in developing new features as well for the developers. When you develop a new feature, it's easier to just pick from what's already been used than to just randomly create a user interface, which used to be the case, and developers who aren't UI people tend to develop crappy UI. So this really does bridge the gap and bring a more usable UI to a new feature before you actually go through the exercise of defining that. There are some cons that we found from using this. Well, common one is there are a lot of CSS classes in Bootstrap elements. Sometimes you can have up to 6 I've seen on a particular element, and it does leave that, and it does make it look a little. It's counterintuitive because it used to be that you wanted to reduce the number of classes and then define the overall, that's like one of the goals that you want to have in keeping things simple. But once you have a framework, it's kind of okay to have more classes. I don't think this is a legitimate account, but it's been raised, and some people think it's like a sin, but I think it's all right, because if you're using officially supported Bootstrap classes and not adding too many of your own custom classes, it's actually better. By heavy I mean the CSS that's being generated by Bootstrap tends to be much larger than if you had just CSS on your own. But the flip side of that argument is that less file, which is what is used to power the CSS, is much smaller, usually, typically. So there's less to maintain because you're actually maintaining the less files, not the CSS, because you're compiling that and getting CSS. But on the other hand, it does result in a larger CSS file, which fortunately, after minification, isn't so bad. Having to learn less is really, I think, the worst initial hump that people have to get through. We have in the Tiki community a lot of designer types or people who are not yet. They're really just at the level of looking at a CSS class and making some changes, and that's the extent of their skill level in coding or in doing anything code like. So having to learn less is a step further, but once they've used it, they're like, okay, this is what learning. I wish I had done this earlier. So I think that is a psychological barrier for some to get over, but once they get through that, they find it great. Getting started, most of you have already gotten started. You know about getbootstrap.com. I won't go there today since most of you have already obviously seen that. Learn about Bootstrap, watch videos, online tutorials, there are tons of them out there, which is really great for a community like Tiki because it's just easy to get everybody up to speed really quickly. Learn about less, using less with Bootstrap especially. What is less? Less is a CSS preprocessor. Most of you who have used Bootstrap in your projects, you know about this already, but how many are new to this? Okay, so there's some. Less is a CSS preprocessor. That means, I'll show you some, I'll probably jump out of PowerPoint and show you an example of what I mean, but it supports variables and mixins. So that's really the, if you ever wish that CSS supports variables, then this is the solution.
Twitter guy.
So I'm going to just show an example of that.
I was asking about the force by SQL, right? Because software for large databases.
So this is a less file that contains custom variables, and if you just scroll up, so these are the colors, and you can define colors such as gray, darker is just lighter, 0, which is black, like this much, gray, dark, gray, and you can define your primary colors of your site, such as grand primary color is this, success color is this, info color is this, warning, danger, secondary, accent, and background. So some of these are standard Bootstrap terminology. Things like success, so the button or the message that success you've done something correctly. Okay, that should be that color. Info, blue, usually something like that. Warning, yellow or red. That's a certain taxonomy that you follow, and you find these colors. And these colors can then be used in the CSS itself. Basically, actually less files, but effectively you can use within the CSS. So you don't have to. It used to be if you have this particular color in 50 different classes in the CSS file, and you wanted to change it one color, you'd have to do a search and replace, and then you have some odd colors that always get left out, and then you get things that are very messy after that. With using less, you can just change that one color that you use, and it's basically a variable to be used in all of the different other classes. Same with the heading or font sizes and so on. For example, right now, I have something that defines the page size is 14 px, and all of the other sizes, like the header sizes, being being a proportion of the base size. So if you change the base size from 14 to 12, all of your different font sizes would be correspondingly reduced when you compile. You won't have that problem of changing the base size down and then your headers are all too big now as a result. So these are all common problems you face just using CSS the old way, that's less aggressive. We're going to open up a So this is a less file, for example, for a theme, yeah, I suppose the theme is the right word, even for there's calls and themes, where I first import a web font, and then I import the Bootstrap, the one that comes with Bootstrap, the variable stop test that comes with Bootstrap, and then I load custom variables for my own project, and then I load the Bootstrap components, and so on and so forth. This is an add-on for my app, which has its own CSS, so it's its own desktop, and it also makes it. So we can just this one, for example. So here's just some CSS classes. Here I have a class called padding, and instead of specifying the padding in a hard-coded way, it's using the variable from one of the variables files that have been loaded before. Same here, the padding. And you will notice as well that there are different size paddings. So XL, LG, extra large, small, and extra small. So these are different sizes for the different device formats. Bootstrap's responsive, so when you reduce, I'll show you what happens on an actual web page. When the size of the screen becomes extra small or small, it uses a different class. So you can have smaller rounded corners on a smaller device or whatever. If there's time at the end and if there's interest, I'll show more code, but I don't want this presentation to be all just looking at code, so let's move on. Bootstrap and Tiki. Slideshow. Here we go. Bootstrap and Tiki. We started about 2 years ago thinking about introducing Bootstrap as the CSS framework to be used in the international system, Tiki. There were a number of drivers towards that. One was that the system kind of needed an upgrade anyway. The CSS hadn't been looked at for many years. It's one of the weak spots of Tiki. The design side of things, it's very strong in the application side of things, but from the CSS and look and feel side, it was really weak. So it needed an upgrade. There was a need to change templates to HTML5 anyway. There was, and unlike, say, WordPress, Tiki is an application. So in a way, it's arguably more suitable for Bootstrap anyway. Bootstrap is originally designed for Twitter as an application for CSS framework for applications. If you think about it, it kind of makes much more sense that an application would benefit much more from the CSS framework than just any other website. Because websites in general, if it's a marketing website, something like that, tend to be extremely bleeding edge in terms of uniqueness design. The design gets full grain, and then you just make the site look like a design, and that's it. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't look like any other site out there in the world. It's an option website, right? Well, might be exaggerating here. But for applications, it's important to have consistency. Because if the user expects a button to be a certain way, or expects certain elements to behave in a certain way, it should be more or less similar. If someone's used to Facebook and Twitter, it doesn't make sense making your application totally crazy, putting the buttons all over the map and doing crazy stuff, because the usability drops, even though you might have kind of eye-candy effect. We needed to make Tiki more friendly. We also needed to make Tiki more responsive in terms of the web design, adopt the responsive web design. And also CSS was kind of monolithic in Tiki. It was one big file, wasn't really broken up by feature. So it was something we wanted to do anyway. So there was a lot of things we wanted to do to make it better in Tiki. As a result, we said, okay, since we're doing it anyway, we should look out there to see what's available, and Bootstrap turned out to be something that made it much easier to achieve these goals than if you were to do it in a custom way. You could always develop a framework as well, but why, right? Why the whole idea of open source is to be able to focus efforts on what's already there, not to reinvent the wheel. So just some quick before and after screenshots. So this is before. It's actually still on our website right now because we haven't upgraded to Tiki 2014 yet. This is the real site. And this dates back about 3-4 years, so it's the design hasn't really changed. You can tell it's a little dated. It's not responsive to a live site afterwards. This is just without doing anything at all, just applying Bootstrap theme onto it. It's much more modern in terms of look and feel. We're designing a theme right now for it, but this is the same theme that just switched to Bootstrap. This is an old site of Synergics that's non-Bootstrap. These are search results at the bottom. These are new search results. This is a flashy custom page done in Bootstrap. This is a list of members that we did pre-Bootstrap, and we actually kind of tried to be a little fancy with members listed in post-Bootstrap. It's not easy to do a lot of things. Once you've got your variables all set up, and the grid is set up, it's just much easier to do any design than you don't have Bootstrap. So these, I don't know if you can see, this is a very basic kind of one example of what you might see before you use Bootstrap. You have it, and then in this particular case, you're showing an error in a little box. So we used to have a class called error, and we used to have a class called simple box. Nothing standard about it. Just defined it, and we used it. And after we implemented Bootstrap, it becomes alert and alert danger. Now, alert is a standard Bootstrap class. It's defined. You look at the Bootstrap documentation. That's one of the classes they use for an alert box. So it automatically gives you a Bootstrap alert box, which is responsive, which is correct, looks right on a big screen, and it also looks good on a mobile device. So as you can imagine, there was quite a lot of work involved in just going through the code, replacing every time you have error, simple docs to change it a bit. But this really is worth the effort, because then the application is consistent throughout. It used to be that some new developers might not use error simple docs. They might do error some other kind of box. Or if you want to customize it, you might do error, and then you might add a class simple box and then Nelson's class or something like that. But with this, you can override the alert class in CSS. And you can also, if you just want to make a minor change like the color or something, you can just override the less variable related to the alert box. So it still looks like a Bootstrap alert box because you want some consistency there. But you could just, provide your own accents on top of it, or change the parameters in the less file. This is another. This is in response to an issue we found with less compilers. How many of you have used less compilers? I just want to get a feel of if anyone uses things like kiosk. Kiosk, anyone? Or so for those of you who are using Bootstrap and less, what do you use to compile the less? Anyone? Let's see, or PHP Storm or something. There are, if you search on the web for less compilers, there's a whole bunch of compilers out there. Kiosk is a common one that watches your folder, and when it finds something there, it compiles it for you automatically. So every time you change a file, a less file, it automatically compiles the CSS. You can always run it off a command line as well. Less C, this is a common compiler that's used. But we find that when you use different compilers, you get different results sometimes, mainly because the version is different. Back in some time ago, the people making the compiler decided that the number of decimal points, for example, for floating point numbers would be different. 6 versus 7, 7 versus 8. And so if you use a different version of less compiler, you end up with a CSS file with the numbers, the decimal point numbers being 7 decimal points versus 8. So that's how you use the source control when you commit that. Because somebody else is using something that generates a 7 decimal point number, and your compiler is generating 6 decimal point number, and then you commit it, looks like you've got tons of changes in the file when it's just the decimal point. But there are also some more serious differences between some really older versions of the compiler. So that's an issue that is a real issue. And if you have a team working on less, it's important to have all of them working using the same version of less compiler. So what we've done in Tiki is to build in a less compiler into the content management system itself. In the CMS, there is a console, a command line console that you use to trigger or correlate the different tasks, and we work in the compiler there. So that kind of helps. So this is a little small, but I just wanted to show some of the common things you might see when using Bootstrap, like COL-SM3, COL-MD2. So Bootstrap is a grid-based system, and it has up to 12. So this means that this disk, for example, will take up 7 columns in a small sized device, and a medium sized device it's 6. So you can set, you can specify whether the diff looks, how wide the diff is on different devices, how many columns it takes out of the full width of the device, depending on the size of the device. Criticisms. Why does everything look the same? So I think I kind of touched a bit about that already. That Tiki is an application used for an application framework most of the time rather than a website framework, because some designers will come to you and say, I don't want my site to look the same as the other site that's using Bootstrap. The reality is Bootstrap is a framework to provide some consistency, but at the same time, you can be very creative with it as well. So I don't think one should think of it as a constraint, but rather discipline. And some discipline in web design is I think called for. Just because you don't want to reinvent the view, and you don't want the user to be exposed to something that's too far out, that is too unlimited to them just from a usability perspective. CSS size is larger, but for Tiki, the CSS size is already pretty big, and we've already shipped a lot of jQuery and other things. So for us, it wasn't a big deal. But if you are writing a really small app and you really need it to be really, really tiny, then you might not want to ship Bootstrap with it. You might just want to do something on your own. But most of the time, people work on pretty big things already in terms of JavaScript and everything else. I'm not really strong in the JavaScript. That's something that you're still kind of fighting against. we still have a lot of jQuery, legacy jQuery in Tiki. In the process of adopting Bootstrap, you replace some of the jQuery with Bootstrap JavaScript where it exists. However, there is JavaScript that comes with official Bootstrap, and there's lots of JavaScript add-ons and other things you can find, implementations of JavaScript around Bootstrap you can find on the web. Some of them are good, some of them are not as good, so you need to kind of do your own analysis of it. It means you need to know JavaScript to evaluate that. And you don't want to just cut and paste anything you find on the web into a platform like Tiki. So, so that's a weak spot. I know there's a possibility of using other JavaScript frameworks out there that work together with Bootstrap, but we haven't got that far yet. But so far, we've been just replacing legacy jQuery where it exists and where it makes sense, and then keeping the old jQuery there if there's no better alternative. And then we have to fix some incompatibilities between the old jQuery and new Bootstrap. In the area, there might be some JavaScript caches and other things that just need to be fixed. I can show you a form afterwards once you get out of this slide, a real life form that has validation in it, and you can see kind of some of the things we did to replace the old jQuery validation displayed with Bootstrap alerts. Too many classes, I mentioned that. Breakages on Bootstrap version upgrade. When Bootstrap went from version 2 to version 3, a lot of things need to be redone. And for people who were using Bootstrap version 2, it was a lot of work. For Tiki, we had already decided that Bootstrap version 3 was the one we were targeting, so we didn't have as much of an issue. But this is something to keep in mind. There is work when the version upgrades, if you want to upgrade to the new version of Bootstrap. Need to learn less for power version differences, I mentioned that. So let me show the form. Very quickly. So see how when I have a bigger screen, I have my buttons here, register login, but when it becomes smaller, it actually becomes like the hamburger icon you can get on your phone, and then you have the register login like that. So that's an example of how it's responsive. This screen resolution is probably really small. It's probably 800 by 600, very, very most. So it's actually stacked the application steps on top and the one below. Usually it's side by side with the bigger screen. So this is almost like a full experience. In fact, it is a full experience and it is smaller. So I'm going to try validating this form. So put some rubbish here. Right, you have this. Please enter the phone number in the format. These are alert classes that are defined in Bootstrap that provides much more consistent experience than before. I don't actually have the old version of it, but the old version was just all over the place. So in terms of getting going in the Tiki community, we needed to get overall buy-in from everybody. So we needed to educate people on what Bootstrap was about. So there was lots of discussion on creating this. We had a Tiki test that, which is like a developer meetup for Tiki, and everyone got together and really brainstormed about how to do this. So since I have a bit of time, I'm going to show the video for oops.
A special kind of meeting was recently held in Barcelona. People from one of the largest open source teams in the world didn't just gather to enjoy each other's company, but to put their minds together and push forward the up-and-coming version of the free software they are creating. More from our NTD correspondent.
These people are here in Barcelona to enjoy the beach or go sightseeing. Everyone here is dedicated in what's called open source software. So what does open source mean? In a nutshell, it means a computer program or web application can be created, shared and modified freely by many people across the internet and contributed back. And here at the TikiWiki project, people are doing exactly that, coming up with new ideas for open source software, a gathering called TikiFest.
So basically, TikiFest is a live event where people meet in real person because it's very nice to have online communities, and we're really good at that, and we're basically building a collaborative online tool, but it's good to meet as well. So basically, back in 2000, the project started in 2003, but in 2003, the first TikiFest was held. And since then, there have been about 35 TikiFests.
Johnny Bradley is a software developer from London. He's been contributing to the TikiWiki project for 3 years now. He explains what he likes the most about it.
Mainly the way there's no kind of leader, there's no sort of top level group of elite people that do everything. It's very fluid and flexible, and everyone's quite easy.
What we are is what we call a democracy. Basically, people participate, they do things, and by doing things, they sort of decide what's going to happen.
The TikiWiki project isn't only for professional computer experts.
It was a bit weird at the beginning because I'm not a coder. I don't know how to write one line of code, but I'm an end user and an experimented user of the tool. So I use the tool with my clients, and it opened for me a lot of new opportunities.
And what does being a part of TikiWiki mean to Mark Laporte?
I think that, of course, at the beginning when I started using open source software, it was mostly as a user. So basically, I had a project, I was helping some nonprofits. I needed a tool to accelerate. So basically, you're using open source. But at one point, I think it's important to, if it happens, some people have to share back, some people have to participate. So I felt that it was a good project. It was a good place for me to help out, and every month when you have thousands of downloads, it feels good to know that there's thousands of people every month that are downloading the software, and somehow it's helping them to do whatever they're trying to do, whatever community they're trying to get together, whatever project they're trying to accomplish.
As time was running out for the TikiFest in Barcelona, and people had to say goodbye to some of the participants, a new TikiFest in Brazil is already being planned. This is Vladka Mašková, NTD, Barcelona, Spain.
Okay.
A special kind of meeting was recently held.
So that's it. I don't think I need to finish the rest of the slides. Open up floor to questions, and just on a side note, Synergy, my company will be looking for interns for this coming year, so we have facility for this. Okay. Yeah.
So you talked about less, right?
Yeah.
There's something else called SAS.
Yes.
What's the difference between when to use less and when to use SAS?
Okay. SAS and less, basically they do the same thing. I don't know SAS. I know less. But the SAS was developed by people in the Ruby community. So if you're a Ruby developer, you might want to use SAS. And if you go to Bootstrap, getbootstrap.com, there's actually a link now on getbootstrap.com itself that links to the SAS version of Bootstrap. So they are officially kind of, supporting it. So if you're a Ruby developer and you think SAS is the way to go because all the other Ruby developers use it, I think it's written in Ruby, must be. I'm a PHP guy, so I don't know that part of the pond, that side of the pond, but they do the same function, and they're very similar in how it works.
Okay, I was just wondering, for compiling less, we can also use a node tool called gov,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Gov less.
yeah.
Oh, okay, just that's what I was wondering. Because,
Yeah. Mhm.
In the last year or two, maybe I started noticing more and more websites using Bootstrap. And usually I notice because I use the websites on the desktop, and on a desktop, those websites look useless. Because you have one image in the middle and 3 words. And the reflow is really nice on a cell phone, but it's a bunch of wasted space on that big screen.
Yeah.
Is that promoted by Bootstrap? Is that encouraged? Why is this happening?
I think that comes, of course, it's the result of the team developer who started off with the Bootstrap theme and then wrote it up. I think it's a combination of fashion and the whole mobile-first philosophy that Bootstrap is promoting. It's not just Bootstrap, Foundation is also promoting the same mobile-first philosophy. The logic, as I mentioned earlier, is it's easier to design something for a smaller device and then expand it to something that's big than to go the other way around. Now, of course, in this case, they probably did it for the small and then ran out of time and didn't expand it for the big. Yeah. So that is a legitimate concern. I mean, if you think that weighting a screen is an issue.
It's not that I don't care about the number of pixels. I care about I have to scroll through 6 pages to read information to open at one.
Yeah, it's still.
And I know it doesn't have to be that way because I use the Bootstrap theme on my WordPress blog, which flows really nicely. It puts 4 posts on a page instead of 1, but not everybody does that, and I wonder why.
Yeah, maybe just laziness or they think it's cool. Yeah.
I myself interned at a place that did a ton of web design. So the problem that you put forth was getting the large designs to like the mobile design is like a ton of work. I understand all that. I know it because the designers there complained about it all the time. But hearing about Bootstrap, I was wondering how this mobile first philosophy, like how in deep can you get so that all the information, how like in Bootstrap, when you said that one of the problems is a lot of people didn't like every site looking the same, how like personal, how deep can you get into the personalization of a site made with Bootstrap?
Very.
Like, can you get like, it's like, just completely like
Yes.
2 sites using Bootstrap that look completely different? Like,
Yeah, you can pretty much do that, but just remember the starting point is the same. So the more, it's more of a time issue, project management time issue than it is a technical feasibility issue, right? Because if you're starting from the same basic classes, then and some of the widgets are the same, right? The alert box is the same, the things like that are the same, pop-ups are the same. To then make 2 sites totally different from that same starting point is it's doable, but the more you try to deviate, the longer it takes. But then you have to ask yourself the question: do you really want to deviate that much? You might want to make it look from a look and feel perspective different, but from a usability perspective the same. So that's actually a function of the web becoming more application-centric than just website-centric. So as sites become more applications, it makes much more sense to have more of a consistency of an experience, even if the look is different. Any other questions? Right against the top?
It's about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, then thank you very much, Nelson. It was a great talk, and I thought out that that Tiki Wiki meetup in Barcelona was all the more impressive because they didn't look like they had air conditioning there. So
Well, there's a hot summer. They actually went out to the beach after, around September.
you take your choice of gifts. I honestly don't know what the difference is, so. Paint a game show.
All right.